30 for felony convictions, 60 to courtroom defeats. $487 billion on the line. And in a single live hearing, 330 million Americans watched as Donald Trump tried to hijack the Federal Reserve, replacing watchdogs with lapdogs to build his personal dictatorship. The chamber shook, protesters roared, and for 37 unbearable seconds, Trump, once the loudest man in America, was left trembling in silence as Jasmine Crockett ripped his empire apart on national TV. Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. Today, under the blinding lights of a live broadcast, the U.S. Capitol became a battlefield. Millions of Americans watched, not knowing they were about to witness one of the most dangerous declarations in modern history. The chamber was packed, the air electric, reporters posed like hunters waiting for the first shot. Donald Trump leaned forward, his expression carved with arrogance, and unleashed the words that detonated like a political bomb. "I have removed Lisa Cook," he declared, voice sharp as steel. "The Federal Reserve will no longer be guarded by watchdogs, it will be commanded by my lapdogs." Gasps cut through the room like shattered glass. For a heartbeat, the nation froze, then chaos erupted. Phones buzzed, cameras flashed, and within seconds #LapdogDictator was flooding social media. The message was clear. Trump wasn't just challenging tradition, he was declaring war on the independence of America's economy. Lisa Cook sat rigid in her chair, her knuckles white as she clutched her papers. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear, but with disbelief that the unthinkable was being spoken aloud. She had dedicated her life to protecting the nation's financial stability, and now, live before the world, her legitimacy was being stripped away by a man already branded by 30 for felony convictions. For a moment, the camera caught her silent, anguished face, a face that told the story of every woman who had been dismissed, every voice silenced, every truth buried. Lawmakers erupted into whispers, some furious, others stunned into silence. Even among Trump's allies, unease rippled. They shifted in their seats, eyes darting, as if realizing they were part of a play more sinister than they had bargained for. The hearing was supposed to be routine. Instead, it became a spectacle of raw power, arrogance, and looming authoritarianism. Americans watching from living rooms and crowded bars leaned forward, their stomachs twisting, as if they could feel the weight of the moment pressing on their own chests. Trump, meanwhile, reclined into his chair, smirking, soaking in the chaos. To him, the uproar was victory. Every gasp, every tweet, every scream outside the Capitol was proof that he still controlled the narrative. He didn't flinch, he thrived on the fear, the cameras lingered on him, and he welcomed the lens like a king addressing his subjects. But beneath the nose, a darker truth pulsed. This was not about Lisa Cook, it was not even about the Federal Reserve. This was about control, absolute control over America's future. Trump's words were not the ramblings of a bitter man. They were the blueprint of a dictator in the making. Replace the guardians with loyalists, silence the experts, turn the machinery of democracy into a private weapon. And he had chosen today, in full view of the nation, to announce it. The chamber quieted for a moment, every heartbeat echoing like a drum. Lisa Cook's lips pressed into a thin line, her silence daring anyone to stand. Trump's eyes scanned the room, daring the same. If he could humiliate one woman, if he could erase her with a sentence, then what else could he erase? The question loomed, heavier than the marble walls around them. If Trump could silence Lisa Cook today, could he silence an entire democracy tomorrow? The chamber had fallen into a stunned hush, Trump's smirk still hanging like poison in the air. And then, scraping back her chair with deliberate force, Jasmine Crockett rose. Every camera swung to her as if pulled by gravity. Her eyes burned, her voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "Mr. Trump," she thundered, "you may believe this chamber is your stage, but today the nation sees exactly what you are, a coward who hides behind power and dares call it leadership." Trump scoffed, leaned forward with that familiar sneer. "Here we go again," he mocked, voice dripping with contempt, "another Democrat puppet, dancing for the cameras. They wind you up, you scream, and nothing changes. Sit down, little actress. You're irrelevant." The insult landed heavy in the room. Some supporters chuckled, others winced, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned in, her voice low, sharp, dangerous. "Irrelevant, I'm not the one convicted on 30 for felony counts. I'm not the one who turned the Oval Office into a crime scene. And I'm not the one trying to hijack the Federal Reserve like it's a family trust fund. You don't want watchdogs, you want lapdogs. You want to turn the people's economy into your dictatorship's playground. The words struck like gunfire. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters hunched over their keyboards, desperate to capture every syllable. Trump stiffened, his grin faltering for the briefest flicker, but pride forced it back. Bold words, he snapped, from a nobody who wouldn't have a career without my name to scream at. Across the aisle, Lisa Cook's body trembled, but she lifted her chin. Her eyes glistened, silent tears betraying both fury and resolve. That moment of fragile defiance was caught by the cameras, transmitted instantly to millions, a woman fighting to exist while power tried to erase her. Jasmine saw it, and that sight poured gasoline on her fire. She turned back to Trump, voice rising, "You call me a puppet? I stand here for every worker crushed by debt, every black woman dismissed as unworthy, every community you've tried to erase. I don't scream for attention, I scream because your corruption is suffocating this country. You've stolen trust, you've stolen dignity, and now you're trying to steal the soul of our economy." The chamber was no longer still, it pulsed with raw tension. Some lawmakers whispered in awe, others in horror. The clash wasn't political theater anymore. It was personal, primal, a duel of wills between a man who thrived on fear and a woman who refused to bow. Trump pounded his fist on the table, his voice cracking under rage. "I am this country's future. Without me, it collapses." Jasmine shot back instantly, her voice a roar that shook the walls. "No, Mr. Trump, without democracy, it collapses, and you are the collapse." The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Lisa Cook closed her eyes, gripping her papers as if Jasmine's defiance had stitched her spine with steel. The audience, both inside and across the nation, leaned so far forward it felt as if they might fall into the chamber itself. And in that breathless standoff, one truth became clear. This was no longer a hearing. It was a reckoning, a collision of destiny. Millions watched, hearts pounding, asking themselves the same question as the cameras zoomed in on the locked eyes of Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump. Who will blink first in this brutal war of willpower? The silence shattered as Trump leaned forward, his face twisted with fury, voice booming through the chamber like a cannon. "You're nothing but a loudmouth black woman who doesn't know her place." Gasps exploded from the crowd, a collective shock that sliced through the hall. The insult hung in the air, violent, heavy, like smoke choking every breath. Some Republicans smirked, others shifted uneasily, while Democrats erupted in outrage. Even seasoned reporters froze for a moment, stunned at the naked venom pouring from a former president's lips. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch, her jaw tightened, her eyes blazed like fire catching wind. She stepped forward, her voice rising, sharp enough to cut glass. "Did you think that would break me, that by calling me names you could erase my voice? No. Mr. Trump, what America sees today is not my weakness, it is yours. You are the biggest parasite on American soil, sucking the lifeblood of democracy for your own greed." The chamber erupted again, some in cheers, others in stunned disbelief. Trump's face flushed crimson. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling glasses and microphones. "You will show me loyalty," he roared, spit flying, his fist pounding again and again like war drums. The force of his rage shook even his closest allies, their eyes darting nervously as though wondering if the beast they had fed was finally out of control. Lisa Cook clutched her papers tighter, her tears streaming now, but she lifted her head, a quiet strength glowing through the fear. Cameras caught it instantly, the image of a trembling woman who refused to crumble under the weight of a bully. Across America, millions sat glued to screens, watching every second unfold like a high-stakes thriller. Twitter flared with updates by the second. Trump explodes at Crockett, parasite line trending. Chamber chaos goes viral. Jasmine raised her voice above the storm, cutting through Trump's fury. "You can scream for loyalty all you want, but loyalty to you means betrayal of the people. America does not belong to you. It never has, and it never will." Her words struck like lightning, sending a jolt of energy across the chamber. Protesters outside the Capitol erupted louder, chants of democracy. Democracy, echoing against the stone walls. Trump slammed the table one final time, his voice shaking with rage. "I am the people. Without me, this country collapses." His shout reverberated, desperate and unhinged. the words of a man clutching power as it slipped through his fingers. For a heartbeat, the chamber froze again, the weight of history pressing down on every soul in the room. And in that silence, every American watching felt the question burn in their chest. This wasn't just about one woman or one man, it was about the fate of a nation. Was this the moment democracy would finally break, or the moment it would fight back with fire? The chamber was still vibrating from Trump's outburst when Jasmine Crockett struck again, her voice steady, sharp, and unrelenting. She didn't waste time on insults, she aimed straight at the heart of the conspiracy. "What we are seeing today is not random chaos," she declared, her eyes locking onto Trump's. "This is a calculated plan. He wants to stack the Federal Reserve with MAGA loyalists, not economists, not public servants, but soldiers of his dictatorship. This isn't about policy, it's about power." The gallery erupted in murmurs, journalists pounding their keyboards as her words lit fire across every newsfeed in America. She pressed forward, drawing blood with each syllable. "We've seen this before. History doesn't just whisper, it screams." In the 1970s, Richard Nixon leaned on the Fed, bullied it, demanded it bend to his re-election. And what happened? Runaway inflation. "This isn't about policy, it's about power." The gallery erupted in murmurs, journalists pounding their keyboards as her words lit fire across every newsfeed in America. She pressed forward, drawing blood with each syllable. "We've seen this before. History doesn't just whisper, it screams." In the 1970s, Richard Nixon leaned on the Fed, bullied it, demanded it bend to his re-election. And what happened? Runaway inflation. A decade of economic pain for millions of Americans who paid the price for one man's greed. And now, Donald Trump wants to repeat that nightmare on a scale this country has never seen. Her voice rose, commanding, as if she were not just speaking to the chamber but to the millions watching at home. Rohit Chopra leaned into his microphone, his words slicing through the tension like a verdict. "This isn't just corruption," he said, his tone grave. "This is economic warfare. If Trump succeeds, interest rates could double overnight. Families will lose homes, businesses will collapse. The national debt will spiral into chaos, and every American from the farmer in Iowa to the single mother in Detroit will pay for his power grab." Gasps rippled across the room, and outside the Capitol the crowd erupted in chants, their fury rattling the windows. The numbers flashed across screens as analysts pushed live updates. Mortgages climbing, credit card rates skyrocketing, trillions in debt ballooning like a storm cloud ready to burst. For the first time, even some of Trump's staunch defenders falter, their eyes narrowing with doubt, their loyalty cracking under the weight of undeniable math. But Trump only sneered, as if the suffering of millions was nothing more than collateral damage in his quest to dominate. Jasmine leaned across the table, her words deliberate, venomous with truth. "This isn't leadership, it's hostage-taking. You are not saving America, you are pawning it. And the question every American must ask themselves today is this: how much power is too much in the hands of one man?" The camera zoomed in on her face, fire blazing in her eyes, and the silence that followed wasn't weakness, it was terror. Terror that she might be right. Terror that Trump's plan was already in motion. And terror of the answer to the question she had just carved into the nation's conscience. Trump shot up from his seat, face blotched red, veins bulging at his temples. He slammed both fists on the table, the microphones rattling under the impact. "You're all traitors," he roared, voice cracking with rage. "Every single one of you who stands in my way, traitors to this country." The word thundered off the marble walls, echoing like a verdict meant to brand his enemies forever. His allies pounded the table in forced applause, but even their clapping sounded hollow. Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned forward, her voice steady yet lethal, slicing through the nose. "Traitors," she spat, her tone dripping with disdain. "You're not saving America, you're pawning it off to the highest bidder. You've turned loyalty into currency, and democracy into collateral. The only thing you've ever been faithful to is your own ego." The chamber trembled with gasps, reporters typing furiously, the words already splashing across headlines in real time. Trump sneered, waving a dismissive hand, but Jasmine's fire had cracked his composure. The room tightened as Sky Perryman, calm but fierce, rose to speak. She didn't shout, she didn't need to, her voice carried with the weight of a nation's conscience. "This isn't just numbers and charts," she said, looking directly into the cameras. "This is about every American sitting at their kitchen table tonight, wondering how they'll pay the mortgage, how they'll keep the lights on, how they'll afford another week of groceries. This is about student loans that bury young people before they've even started their lives. This is about parents praying their credit card won't decline at the gas pump. And now, Donald Trump wants to gamble it all away for his dictatorship. The chamber grew still not out of respect for Trump's fury, but because Perryman's words hit where it mattered most: ordinary lives, ordinary struggles. The faces outside the Capitol holding protest signs weren't just symbols. They were every family who felt the crushing weight of bills piling up on their tables. The camera cut to Lisa Koch, her eyes wet but unflinching, embodying both the fragility and the resilience of those millions. Trump snarled, pointing a trembling finger at Perryman. "Fear-mongering, lies, the people want me, and they'll follow me into battle." But the words rang desperate, hollow, collapsing under the raw truth that had just been spoken. His fist slammed again, but this time the echo felt weaker, less commanding, like a drumbeat of a regime fraying at the edges. Jasmine seized the pause, her voice steady, precise, merciless. "No, Mr. Trump, the people don't want a battle, they want bread on the table, roofs over their heads, and a future for their children. And what you are offering them is ruin." The line hit like a thunderclap. For a moment, the chamber seemed to tilt, the balance of power shifting under the weight of her words. Across the country, Americans sat in living rooms, diners, and office break rooms, jaws tight, hands clenched. They weren't just spectators anymore. They were witnesses to a truth that struck directly at their wallets, their families, their survival. The hearing had stopped being politics, it had become personal. And in that moment, the unspoken question cut sharper than any insult hurled in that chamber. What happens when millions of Americans realize that their kitchen table bills are just pawns in Donald Trump's game of power? The roar began with a handful of voices that soon swelled into a wave. Trump supporters inside the chamber rose to their feet, clapping and chanting his name like a rally crowd rather than elected officials. Their cheers ricocheted off the marble walls, drowning reason in raw, tribal energy. The sound was intimidating, primal, designed to crush opposition with sheer volume. For a moment, it felt as though democracy itself was being shouted into silence. Jasmine stood in the center of the storm, her heart hammering against her ribs. The noise pressed in on her, suffocating, as row after row of men in suits pounded their fists against desks, their faces twisted into sneers of loyalty to Trump. For the first time that day, doubt pierced her armor. A flicker of fear whispered in her chest. What if the machine was too big, the power too entrenched, the light allowed to fight? She glanced around and saw eyes averting, colleagues shrinking, some even leaning back as if to distance themselves from her. The isolation was brutal, a knife of loneliness cutting deep. Trump noticed, his grin widening as he basked in the spectacle. He raised his hand, and the cheers roared louder. The chamber transformed into an arena of intimidation. "You see," he shouted over the frenzy, "the people are with me. She is alone." The words landed like a hammer, pounding the seed of doubt deeper into Jasmine's mind. Cameras zoomed in on her face, searching for cracks, hunting for weakness. Across the nation, millions of Americans leaned closer to their screens, holding their breath. And then something small, almost imperceptible, shifted. Beside her, Lisa Koch, trembling but unbroken, reached out and placed a hand on Jasmine's arm. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of centuries of women silenced, of voices erased, of battles fought and lost. The touch was not just solidarity, it was defiance, a wordless reminder that even in the darkest storm, one spark could light a fire. Jasmine looked into Lisa's eyes and saw it: the refusal to surrender, the demand to stand tall. The fear inside her chest hardened into resolve. Jasmine straightened, her voice rising above the chants, sharp and unyielding. "You may drown this chamber in no's, but you will not drown out the truth. I will not let history repeat itself. We will not return to the days when one man's greed could plunge millions into suffering. Not now. Not ever." Her words cut through the clamor, forcing a pause, if only for a breath, as her defiance carved itself into the air. The cheers faltered for a moment, uncertainty creeping into the rhythm of Trump's chorus. Even some who had chanted seconds before hesitated, eyes flickering between Trump's smirk and Jasmine's fire. Outside, the crowd of protesters swelled louder, their chants echoing back into the chamber, a reminder that the nation was watching, judging, deciding. And so the scene locked into a standoff, Trump reveling in the nose of his loyalists, Jasmine standing with nothing but conviction and the silent strength of those who believed in her. The question thundered through the chamber and across America like a drumbeat of destiny. Can one woman truly hold the line against a man who would be dictator? The battle inside the chamber was still raging when the outside world caught fire. Within seconds of Trump's declaration, "The Fed will no longer be guarded by watchdogs, but by my lapdogs," the clip detonated across the internet. On TikTok, it replayed in endless loops, each second punctuated by captions screaming "Dictator move." Twitter, now X, lit up like a battlefield at midnight. Hashtags shot to the top of global trends. Hashtag lapdog dictator. Hashtag Crockett vs Trump. Hashtag save the Fed. Millions watched the clip on their phones, some with fury, some with disbelief, but all with the same sinking realization. This was not politics as usual. College students huddled in dorm rooms, their faces glowing in the dark as they cursed at their screens. Factory workers paused on lunch breaks, shaking their heads in disgust, one muttering, "He thinks he owns the damn country." Retirees scrolled with trembling fingers, anger rising as they whispered, "Not again, not after Nixon." The outrage snowballed into a digital uprising. Jasmine Crockett's fiery retort, "You're pawning America to the highest bidder," was clipped, remixed, and blasted across millions of feeds. In one viral edit, her words were overlaid with images of broken factories, foreclosure signs, and families packing boxes into trucks. The video racked up 10 million views in under an hour, the comment section overflowing. "She said what we've been screaming for years." And Jasmine, standing alone yet unbowed inside the Capitol, was suddenly no longer just a congresswoman. She was a symbol, a digital rallying cry. Her face appeared on protest posters, on profile pictures, on trending memes that mocked Trump's lapdogs with images of collars and leash stamped with the MAGA logo. The internet had weaponized itself, transforming outrage into a movement. The montage spread further. A truck driver in Texas pulled over to watch the livestream on his phone, slamming the steering wheel in fury. A nurse in Chicago replayed Jasmine's words between patients, whispering, "Finally, someone's fighting him head-on." A single mother in Atlanta live-streamed her reaction, tears streaking her cheeks as she shouted, "He wants to take the Fed like it's his piggy bank, and we're supposed to sit quiet." Thousands tuned in, flooding her chat with solidarity. The atmosphere online felt electric, as if millions of strangers had been bound together by a single pulse. Yet beneath the fury, there was fear that nose on a screen could never match the raw machinery of power Trump wielded. Videos of his supporters chanting in the chamber played side by side with Jasmine's defiance, each clip a duel for America's soul. One represented blind obedience, the other, unyielding resistance. The algorithms couldn't keep up. News anchors scrambled to narrate the chaos. But the people no longer waited for cable networks, they were narrating it themselves, live, raw, unfiltered. It was a storm without borders, a rebellion without bullets, spreading faster than fire in dry grass. But as Jasmine's name soared and Trump's threats echoed, a chilling question began to creep into the comment threads, whispered beneath the hashtags and memes, lingering like a shadow no one wanted to face. Will digital voices alone ever be enough to stop the march of political tyranny? The noise from outside seeped into the chamber like a rising tide, the chants of protesters mixing with the buzz of phones vibrating on every desk. Easing tide, the chants of protesters mixing with the buzz of phones vibrating on every desk. But inside, Jasmine Crockett rose again, her frame steady, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 voices beyond those walls. She held up a thick folder, its edges bristling with marked tabs. The camera zoomed in, every lens hungry, every American watching on edge. Her voice cut through the chamber like a siren. Donald Trump wants to control the Federal Reserve, but let's not forget who he is. 30 for felony convictions, 34, not rumors, not speculation convictions, fraud, falsification of business records. Lies stacked on lies until truth itself was buried under his empire of deceit. Gasps rippled like a shockwave through the room. Some Republicans stiffened in their seats, eyes darting toward Trump, their faces pale with unease. Democrats leaned forward, hungry for the kill. Trump smirked, but the smirk trembled. He waved his hand dismissively. Barking, "Fake charges, witch hunts, everybody knows it," his voice echoed. but the resonance was thin, brittle, failing to command. The chamber did not echo back. Instead, it sank into silence, the kind that damns more than any guilty verdict. Jasmine slammed the folder onto the table, the crack reverberating like a gavel. "You've already stolen trust," she roared, her eyes locked on Trump. "Now you want to steal the economy. You want to take every credit card bill, every mortgage payment, every grocery receipt, and hold it hostage for your own power." The word stabbed into the marrow of the chamber. Lawmakers shifted, reporters typed frantically, and outside the crowd roared louder. Their voices carried on live streams across the world. Trump's lips moved, but the sound faltered. For a man built on no's, the silence was a death sentence. He leaned back, his jaw tightening, eyes darting for allies, but even some of his own party sat stone-faced, unwilling to tether themselves to a sinking ship. The spectacle was no longer his, it belonged to her. The cameras captured it all: Jasmine's defiance, Lisa Cook's quiet tears hardening into resolve, Sky Perryman's nod of solidarity, and the American people, students in classrooms, parents in kitchens, retirees in nursing homes watched with breathless as one woman pulled back the curtain on the empire of lies. Social media feeds exploded again, this time not just with hashtags, but with disbelief that the man who once commanded absolute dominance was cornered, caged by truth itself. The silence in that chamber was more deafening than Trump's shouts had ever been. It was the silence of a predator realizing his prey had turned, the silence of power slipping away grain by grain. And in that unbearable stillness, one question thundered across the nation, a question no spin or slogan could drown. Was the master of lies finally being cornered by the relentless blade of truth? The folder still lay on the table, its pages spread like exposed wounds of corruption. Trump's hand twitched as if to grab it, but he didn't move. He opened his mouth to roar, to call it lies, to summon his old thunder. But nothing came. For the first time in memory, Donald Trump was silent. The chamber froze, a stunned stillness falling like a curtain over the chaos. The camera zoomed in mercilessly, lenses tightening on his face. Viewers across America saw it, the sweat beating at his temples, the faint tremor in his jaw, the eyes that darted like a cornered animal searching for escape. Seconds ticked by, each one amplified by the silence. 1, 2, 3. On social media, the count began. Hashtags filled with numbers as millions typed in unison. Number 4, number 5, number 6. The nation wasn't just watching. It was measuring, clocking the collapse of a man who had built his empire on never shutting up. By the 10th second, the chamber was suffocating. Journalists glanced at one another, their fingers hovering over keyboards, hardly believing what they were seeing. By the 15th, even his allies had shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting downward, some tugging at their collars. By the 20th, the protesters outside screamed louder, their chants echoing through the marble like the voice Trump could not muster. Jasmine stood unmoving, her gaze locked on him, steady and unwavering. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, she simply stood, letting his silence do what decades of outrage could not. In that moment, the power dynamic flipped, the spotlight no longer his to command. The predator looked small, diminished, a man stripped of his roar before the entire world. By the 30th second, the digital uprising had reached fever pitch. And TikTok creators overlaid the silence with countdown clocks and captions, the loudest silence in American history. On Twitter, every passing second became a meme, the numbers stacking like bricks in a wall closing around him. 31, 32, 33. The spectacle transcended politics. It was theater, tragedy, and justice colliding in real time. And then, finally, at 37 seconds, Trump's lips parted, but the sound was broken, weak, a whisper drowned by the roar of the crowd outside and the clicking fury of keyboards inside. He had already lost. The silence had sentenced him before he could form a word. Across America, millions felt it in their bones. For minorities, for the silenced, for the overlooked, Jasmine's defiance was no longer just resistance, it was representation. Her voice against his silence became a mirror, reflecting every battle waged by those told to sit down, to be quiet, to know their place. For once, the tables turned, the chamber erupted, not in no's, but in the collective realization that history had shifted. One man's silence had spoken louder than all his lies. And the question now burned hotter than ever, echoing through homes, streets, and feeds. When a tyrant finally falls silent, who will be the one to speak the loudest? The silence had broken him. 37 seconds of humiliation simmered into rage, and suddenly Donald Trump erupted like a volcano. He shot up from his chair, face crimson, sweat dripping down his temples, his voice exploding across the chamber. "This is a kangaroo court," he bellowed, spittle flying as he slammed the desk so hard the microphone screeched. "A sham, a disgrace. You're nothing but traitors, liars, scum." His words tore through the chamber like shrapnel, sharp and vile, each insult ricocheting off marble walls and hitting the stunned audience. Reporters scrambled, thumbs flying across phones as breaking headlines flashed across screens nationwide. Dictator's outburst. Trump melts down live. The spectacle was everywhere at once, on TV, on TikTok, in Twitter threads updating by the second. The former president, once a master of dominating the stage, now looked like a man possessed, screaming into the void while the world took notes. Jasmine Crockett, by contrast, didn't move. She remained seated, her eyes locked on him with icy calm, her stillness louder than his fury. Where his face burned red, hers radiated control. Where his voice cracked, hers waited. That contrast, the chaos of a crumbling strong man against the composure of a woman holding the line, was cinematic, a living split screen for millions watching. Trump's voice grew more feral. "You think you can embarrass me? You think you can trap me with your lies? I am the people's champion. Without me, this nation is nothing." His fists pounded harder, veins bulging, his body trembling with fury. Even his allies flinched, their eyes darting to the cameras that captured every unhinged moment, every spit-flecked word. It was no longer a show of strength, it was the televised unraveling of a man desperate to hold on. The chamber gasped with each escalation, and yet Jasmine stayed motionless, her silence a weapon sharper than any insult. Lisa Cook looked at her with awe, as if drawing courage from the sheer steadiness radiating from Jasmine's frame. Sky Perryman leaned forward, whispering just loud enough for microphones to catch. "History is watching, Donald, and it will not forgive what it sees." Outside the Capitol, the protests swelled louder, their chants beating like drums against the stone. "Democracy! Democracy!" Inside, Trump's screams competed with that roar, his rage amplified but his authority shrinking with every word. Viewers at home could feel the tipping point where anger stopped looking powerful and started looking pathetic. The cameras closed in, framing Jasmine's calm against Trump's meltdown, a contrast so stark it became iconic in real time. One man's implosion, one woman's resolve. The balance of power had shifted, not with violence, but with exposure. And as Trump's echo faded into the marble, the question burned in the air like smoke after a blast. When power finally loses control, what comes next? The fall of tyranny, or its most dangerous strike? Trump's voice still echoed when the chamber cracked apart. Republicans on one side leapt to their feet, pounding desks, shouting, "Stand with Trump! Stand with Trump!" Their chants filled the air like a drumbeat of blind loyalty. But others shifted in their seats, unease twisting their faces as if they'd just witnessed a dam beginning to break. For years, they had cheered his bluster, but now, live on national television, his meltdown looked less like power and more like madness. The divide widened with every second. A congressman from Texas bellowed that Trump was the only true defender of America, his words nearly drowned by boos from across the aisle. A senator from Utah whispered furiously to colleagues, shaking his head, his jaw clenched in disgust. The split screen of America was now visible in flesh and blood, defenders screaming themselves hoarse, doubters sitting in heavy silence, torn between fear of their base and the truth they could no longer deny. Then it happened, the moment no one thought they'd hear. A Republican from Ohio, face pale, voice trembling but clear, rose slowly. All cameras swiveled toward him, the nose collapsing into a tense hush. "I can't follow him anymore," he said, each word like a knife cutting through the chamber. "This isn't leadership, this is tyranny. And I will not be complicit." His words detonated like a bomb. The chamber exploded into chaos, Democrats clapping, Republicans screaming betrayal, the gallery roaring in disbelief. Every camera caught every angle, hands waving furiously, lawmakers shouting over one another, aides scrambling with papers, security inching closer as though sensing the chaos might boil into something worse. On social media, the clip spread like wildfire, millions replaying the single phrase, "I can't follow him anymore." over and over, dissecting it like prophecy. For Trump's movement, it was heresy. For his opponents, it was the first crack in the iron wall of fear. Trump's face twisted with rage, his fist slamming the table again. "Traitor! Weakling, you'll regret this," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the defector. But the damage was done. The fracture was visible, irreversible, and America had seen it live. His voice, once thunderous, now sounded desperate, shrill against the roar of dissent. Through the pandemonium, Jasmine Crockett rose, her voice cut like a blade, rising above the chaos with surgical precision. "This is the cost of unchecked power. Look at this chamber torn apart by one man's greed, one man's lies. Today you must choose loyalty to him or loyalty to the Constitution. Because you cannot serve both." Her words hung in the air, searing, undeniable, pressing every lawmaker to confront their reflection in real time. The chamber rattled with fury, fear, and something new: possibility. The cracks were no longer whispers, but shouts, captured from every camera angle, replayed across every screen in America. And as the nation watched the civil war unfold inside its own halls of power, one question raged hotter than the chaos itself: could this fracture be the one that finally shatters Trump's hold on America? Outside the Capitol, the air trembled with fury. Thousands had already gathered, their voices uniting into a single chant that pounded like a heartbeat against the stone walls: democracy, democracy. What began as scattered groups had swelled into a tidal wave: families with children on their shoulders, veterans in worn uniforms, students carrying homemade signs, minorities whose voices had been silenced too many times before. The steps of the Capitol shook, not from violence, but from the sheer force of human defiance. Handmade banners flapped in the cold wind, painted with words like "no dictatorship," "our economy," "our future," and most strikingly, Jasmine Crockett's face, emblazoned with the words "she fights for us." Her image had leapt from the chamber into the streets, no longer just a politician, but a symbol of resistance. Protesters carried her photo high above their heads, chanting her name alongside the cries for democracy. In that moment, she wasn't just a congresswoman, she was a beacon. Police lines formed, the sound of shields locking in place echoing across the square. Protesters pressed forward anyway, some kneeling with hands raised, others daring to wave flags inches from riot gear. A veteran with medals pinned to his jacket shouted through a megaphone, "I fought for freedom, not for a dictator." His voice cracked, but it carried like thunder. Nearby, a young Latina mother clutched her daughter's hand, whispering, "We are here for her future." Arrests began as police lunged, dragging students into vans, but the crowd only roared louder, defiance feeding defiance. The montage was electric, broadcast live across the world. A teacher in Ohio led her students in watching the livestream on a classroom projector. Truckers in Michigan honked their horns in solidarity as they rolled past highways where protesters waved signs. Church congregations gather after service to pray, while chanting Jasmine's name. America became a stage, and every protester another character in the drama unfolding before history's eyes. Inside the chamber, lawmakers could hear the chants rising through the stone like an unstoppable tide. For every insult Trump hurled, the crowd answered with a cry of democracy. For every fist he slammed, 100 fists rose outside in unison. The sound wasn't just noise, it was a warning, a reminder that power no longer lives solely within those walls. Jasmine's name continued to surge online, her face projected onto digital billboards in Times Square, her quotes painted on cardboard signs across state capitals. To the people, she was no longer just a voice against Trump, she was their voice, their shield, their defiance given flesh. The night deepened, but the fire in the streets only grew brighter. Families risked arrest, veterans locked arms with teenagers. Strangers became allies, united in one cry. And as the Capitol loomed above, glowing like a fortress besieged, one question surged louder than the chants, louder than the sirens, louder than Trump's crumbling rage: can the people's fire burn long enough to outlast the cold grip of a man desperate to be dictator? The chamber fell into a tense hush as Rohit Chopra rose from his seat, a thick report clutched in his hands. He adjusted his glasses, his face pale but resolute, and spoke into the microphone with a steady voice that cut through the tension. "What I am about to present is not speculation, it is data, cold, hard numbers. And if this plan goes forward, It will cost the American people trillions of dollars. Screens flickered on around the chamber, and suddenly graphs appeared, lines shooting upward like rockets, spirals curling downward into chaos. Debt projected to balloon past unsustainable levels, interest rates climbing to heights unseen in decades. Each figure was a blade, slicing into the illusion that Trump's power grab was anything less than economic warfare. Gasps rippled as lawmakers stared at the images, their faces drained of color. Chopra continued, his voice growing heavier. Under Trump's scheme to replace independent experts with loyalists, interest rates could double overnight. Mortgages would skyrocket, families would lose their homes. Credit card debt already strangling millions would drown them entirely. Small businesses across this country would collapse under the weight of loans they could no longer afford. He paused, letting the words hang like thunder. This isn't policy. This is economic destruction. Then came the stories. On the screens appeared video testimonies woven into the report. A small diner owner in Pennsylvania, wiping his hands on his apron, voice breaking as he said he'd already mortgaged his house twice and wouldn't survive another hike. A single mother in Georgia, sitting at her kitchen table with overdue bills spread like scars before her, whispering that one more increase would force her to choose between food and electricity. A veteran in Arizona, medals pinned to his chest, fists clenched as he said he didn't fight for a country that would hand its economy to one man's ego. The chamber wasn't just watching numbers, they were watching lives unravel. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice carrying into the microphone, steady yet burning. This isn't just about interest rates or debt ceilings, this is about systemic oppression. Black families, Latino families, Native communities, those already pushed to the margins, will be crushed first, hardest, and longest. Trump's dictatorship won't just bankrupt our economy, it will bankrupt justice itself. The words landed like thunder, ricocheting through the chamber and out to the millions watching live. Outside, the chants of democracy rose louder, echoing against the stone as if in answer. Trump shifted in his seat, his face stiff, jaw tight, but he didn't interrupt because even he knew that interrupting numbers this brutal would only sharpen the blade against him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Not the silence of awe, but the silence of recognition, of lawmakers and citizens alike realizing the stakes. Across America, families watching from living rooms, diners, classrooms, saw themselves in those charts and testimonies. For once, the abstract world of policy had collided directly with their survival, and as the chamber absorbed the truth, one question flared brighter than the graphs on the screen, louder than the protests outside, sharper than Trump's rage. Will Americans finally connect the dots between cold policy and the survival of their own lives? The graph still glowed on the screens, debt spirals climbing higher like storm clouds ready to burst. The testimonies of struggling Americans lingered in the air, too raw to ignore. But Trump leaned forward, his face red with fury, and spat into the microphone. Fake news economics, nothing but lies cooked up by radical leftists and crooked bureaucrats. The economy was perfect under me. Everyone knows it, these numbers mean nothing. His voice cracked on the last word, but he pushed through, pounding the desk as if volume could erase the truth. The chamber erupted not with support, but with laughter. A sharp, bitter kind of laughter that carried more weight than any accusation. Reporters smirked as they typed, lawmakers exchanged incredulous glances, and even a few Republicans covered their faces with their hands. The mighty showman was suddenly small, flailing, trying to shout down reality itself, and then Jasmine struck. She rose, her voice booming with a force that seemed to shake the chamber's very foundation. Fake news economics, you can smear journalists, you can smear colleagues, but you cannot smear math. Numbers don't care about your ego, even math calls you a liar. Her words detonated, and the chamber exploded with no half outrage, half uncontainable applause. The phrase shot across social media instantly, already trending before the echo faded. #MathDONT lie. Trump's face contorted, caught between humiliation and rage. He tried to speak, but the laughter drowned him out. His hand gripped the edge of the desk as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. For a man who had built his empire on spectacle, being laughed at live on national television was the ultimate humiliation. And then an almost invisible moment of grace. Lisa Koch, who had sat trembling for hours, wiped her eyes and let a faint smile break across her face. It was small, fleeting, but powerful. The cameras caught it, and the image spread instantly. A woman who had been threatened, erased, nearly silenced, now finding hope in the sight of her tormentor crumbling under truth. Trump tried again, shouting over the uproar. "They're lying to you. They're all lying. Only I can fix this, only me." But his voice wavered, the confidence gone, the rhythm broken. Every desperate word made him look less like a leader and more like a man clinging to a collapsing throne. The chamber no longer belonged to him, it belonged to Jasmine, to Lisa, to the numbers glowing on the screens and the truth they carried. And across America, millions of families saw themselves reflected in those numbers and knew no spin, no slogan, no insult could change what they felt in their wallets and at their kitchen tables. As the laughter, the chants, and the echoes of defiance swirled together, one question towered above the wreckage of Trump's words, hanging heavy in the air like a verdict. How long can deception shield an empire already crumbling under the weight of its own lies? The echo of laughter and outrage still rattled the chamber when the real war erupted, not in marble halls, but on every television screen, every smartphone, every feed across America. Within minutes, right-wing outlets rushed to Trump's defense, their anchors red-faced, shouting into cameras, "This is a witch hunt, fake charges, radical Democrats trying to strangle America's economy." Their banners screamed words like unfair trial and political theater, desperate to cast Trump as the victim, the martyr. But mainstream networks played a very different story. On CNN, the chyron blazed, "Trump humiliated Liv. Math doesn't lie." MSNBC rolled split screens, Trump red-faced, screaming fake news economics, against Jasmine's fiery retort, "Even math calls you a liar." The contrast was devastating, cinematic, a duel of narratives broadcast into every living room. In the chamber, Jasmine stood again, refusing to let the noise outside dictate the truth inside. Her voice was firm, commanding, carrying like a blade across the room. "America, listen to me. This isn't about numbers on a page, it's about your lives. Every credit card you swipe, every mortgage you pay, every dollar you borrow, it is all tied to this fight. If we let one man corrupt the Federal Reserve, your bills, your debt, your children's future will be his weapon." In the chamber, Jasmine stood again, refusing to let the noise outside dictate the truth inside. Her voice was firm, commanding, carrying like a blade across the room. "America, listen to me. This isn't about numbers on a page, it's about your lives. Every credit card you swipe, every mortgage you pay, every dollar you borrow, it is all tied to this fight. If we let one man corrupt the Federal Reserve, your bills, your debt, your children's future will be his weapon." The emotional high surged as Americans, millions who had felt invisible, suddenly saw themselves represented. A farmer in Iowa recorded a reaction video, his rough hands holding up his credit card as he whispered, "She's right. Every swipe is a fight." A student in California live-streamed from her dorm, crying as she said Jasmine was the first politician who had spoken directly to her crushing debt. In Detroit, a grandmother surrounded by her grandchildren shouted at the television, "That woman is fighting for us." The movement was no longer abstract, it was personal, visceral, alive. Meanwhile, right-wing pundits scrambled to counterattack. They plastered screens with clips of Trump's defenders shouting traitors. In the chamber, tried to spin Jasmine as hysterical, radical, unhinged, but the effort felt forced, brittle. For every insult they hurled, Jasmine's words spread further, resonating deeper, replayed over and over by millions who had lived the pain she described. In living rooms across America, families argued, debated, chose sides. At dinner tables, parents explained to children why one woman's stand might decide their future. On the streets, protesters waved signs with Jasmine's words printed in bold black letters, "Every swipe, every mortgage, every fight." The battle lines were no longer just political, they were cultural, generational, existential. Truth and lies clashed not just in Congress, but in the bloodstream of America itself. And as the nation convulsed between two competing realities, one question pounded louder than the chants, louder than the headlines, louder than Trump's fading roars: who will win, the truth or the megaphone of lies? Trump leaned back, his eyes narrowing into slits, the smirk returning like a shadow crawling back after the light. His voice dripped with venom as he began to dredge up falsehoods long dismissed. "She's corrupt, she's bought, she's nothing more than a puppet of special interests." Ask her about the scandals nobody wants to talk about. Ask her who's really paying her bills. His words slithered through the chamber, each accusation more desperate than the last. He wasn't debating policy anymore, he was clawing a character, trying to wound where facts had failed. Gasps rippled across the room. Some Republicans nodded eagerly, seizing on the smear, while Democrats stiffened in disgust. The attack was raw, personal, dripping with malice. The cameras zoomed in, capturing Trump's face twisted with rage and Jasmine's expression calm, collected, yet burning with fury beneath the surface. She rose slowly, the silence amplifying every second of her movement. Her voice, when it came, was controlled fire. You attack because you are afraid of truth, afraid of accountability, afraid of a woman who refuses to bow to your lies. Her words sliced through the chamber, each syllable a scalpel exposing the fear behind Trump's bluster. The audience erupted not in chaos this time, but in a wave of applause that rolled through the chamber like thunder. For minorities across the country watching on screens, the moment was electric. They saw themselves in her. Every insult hurled at her was a reminder of insults they had endured. Every attempt to silence her was a reflection of battles they had fought. A black teenager in Atlanta posted a clip with tears streaming, writing, "She's fighting for us." A Latina mother in Arizona whispered to her children, "That's how you face a bully." Jasmine was no longer just answering Trump, she was carrying the weight of millions who knew that struggle in their bones. Trump's face flushed deeper, his voice cracking as he tried to fire back, but his words stumbled, unraveling under the weight of her composure. He had always thrived on control, on intimidation, on bending others beneath his voice. But Jasmine's calm fury reflected it back at him like a mirror, stripping him bare. For the first time, the bully looked small, diminished by the truth he could not escape. And in that silence between his faltering rage and her unbreakable defiance, the question seared itself across the chamber, across America, across history itself. What happens when a bully finally meets his match? The chamber, still vibrating from Trump's unraveling, fell into a sudden hush as Jasmine Crockett rose. She didn't shout at first, she waited, commanding the silence, forcing every pair of eyes and every camera lens onto her. Then, with a voice that carried both steel and fire, she began. We fight for every worker who breaks their back just to see their paycheck swallowed by debt. We fight for every mother choosing between food and rent. We fight for every child forgotten by greed and corruption. We fight because if we don't, they will steal the very future out from under us. The words reverberated like cannon fire. Lawmakers leaned forward, some clutching their chests as if struck. The chamber, moments ago fractured by fury, now vibrated with raw electricity. Even her opponents sat stiff, the sheer weight of her conviction pressing against them like a storm they could not ignore. Outside, the protests swelled to deafening levels. The chants of democracy, democracy, now carried Jasmine's name. Banners waved with her face emblazoned across them, the word warrior splashed in bold red letters. The hashtag Crockett the warrior detonated online, climbing to the top of global trends within minutes. Social media feeds pulsed with her words, each clip shared like a spark leaping from one heart to another, igniting a wildfire of resistance. And then came the moment that pierced deeper than all the no's. A camera outside captured a young black girl, no older than 10, standing on her father's shoulders amid the crowd. She held a cardboard sign scrawled in marker, "She's fighting for me." Tears streaked her cheeks as she shouted Jasmine's name into the night. The image went viral instantly, a symbol of innocence demanding protection, of hope refusing to die. Back inside, Jasmine's final words thundered like a verdict. This fight is not about me. Not about him, it's about all of us. And we will not bow to fear. Not now. Not ever. The chamber erupted, applause crashing like waves against stone. The nation felt it not as a speech, but as a rallying cry, a declaration that truth and courage could still break through the chokehold of tyranny. And as her voice echoed across Capitol Hill and into the streets, one question burned hotter than the fires of protest. Can words ignite a revolution stronger than fear itself? The chamber was still vibrating from Jasmine's rallying cry when Trump lurched back to his microphone, face flushed, sweat shining under the blinding lights. He raised his fist, trying to reclaim the room with the force of his voice. "You fools don't understand," he shouted, voice breaking into a snarl. "America doesn't want watchdogs. America doesn't want weakness. America wants a dictator." For a heartbeat, time itself froze. The words hung in the air like a live wire sparking against stone. Gasps erupted across the chamber, sharp and piercing, like glass shattering in unison. Even his staunchest allies flinched, some instinctively covering their mouths, as if they had just heard a curse too terrible to repeat. The silence that followed wasn't ordinary silence, it was the silence of history being seared into memory. Outside, the protests paused mid-chant. Thousands stood stunned, phones raised, replaying the words on live streams, the phrase already clipped and blasted across social media. Within seconds, hashtags surged, hashtag Dictator Trump, hashtag he said it, hashtag fatal error. On cable news, the chyron snapped into place in bold red letters. Trump admits dictatorship desire. Across America, families watching at kitchen tables and diners leaned closer to their screens, jaws slack. The camera zoomed mercilessly on Trump's face, the smirk faltering as he realized too late what had just slipped out. For a man who thrived on controlling the narrative, this was the one line that could not be spun away. His hand trembled on the desk, his eyes darting, searching for an escape. But there was none, and then Jasmine struck. She rose with a calm so sharp it cut deeper than rage. Her voice carried the weight of the moment, her words destined to be replayed in history books. And today, America rejects you. The chamber erupted, Democrats pounding their desks, some Republicans burying their faces in shame. Outside, the crowd's stunned silence erupted into a roar, chants of "not a dictator. Not now. Not ever," thundering against the Capitol walls. The images raced across screens, Jasmine standing tall, her finger pointed at Trump like a gavel delivering judgment, while he sat shrinking under the weight of his own confession. Lisa Cook clutched Jasmine's arm, tears streaming not of fear, but of vindication. Sky Perryman leaned forward, whispering, "That's it. That's the crack that breaks him," but Trump, desperate, tried to recover. "You know what I meant," he barked, voice cracking with panic. "You twisted my words, yet the damage was irreversible." Clips played on loop, slowed down, subtitled, dissected. America wants a dictator, no spin could erase it, no slogan could bury it. For once, the words that made him powerful became the very chains dragging him down. The chamber buzzed with the electricity of turning tides. The people outside screamed louder, the internet pulsed with fury, and the nation felt the balance shifting beneath its feet. The question wasn't whether Trump had misspoken, it was whether America had finally heard the truth it had feared all along. And as the echoes of Jasmine's verdict reverberated like thunder, one question cut through the chaos like a blade. Was this the moment the tide finally turned against a man who mistook power for destiny? The chamber buzzed with tension when a clerk rushed forward, a sealed envelope trembling in his hands. All cameras pivoted. The judge's ruling had come down faster than anyone expected. Jasmine Crockett stood, her eyes blazing, and tore open the document. The silence was electric, every heartbeat echoing as she read aloud. The court blocks Donald J. Trump's unlawful attempt to remove Governor Lisa Cook. Her position remains intact. Justice has spoken. The words detonated like thunder, gasps erupted, shouts of triumph rippled through the chamber, and outside the Capitol the crowd roared as the news spread like wildfire. Lisa Cook pressed her hands to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes as relief washed over her trembling frame. For the first time in hours, her shoulders lifted, no longer a target, but a survivor. Trump staggered back, his face drained of color, lips tightening into a thin, shaking line. He tried to sneer, to dismiss it, but the cameras caught the crack in his facade. His supporters splintered instantly. Some shouted rigged, while others sat in stunned silence, eyes flicking away, unwilling to chain themselves to a sinking ship. The fracture was visible, undeniable, live for the nation to see. Across America, living rooms erupted in celebration. A teacher in Detroit hugged her students as the verdict flashed on the classroom screen. A retired veteran in Florida raised his glass and whispered, "Finally, a win." Families poured into the streets, waving flags, holding signs, chanting Jasmine's name as if she were the embodiment of their collective relief. For one fleeting moment, democracy felt tangible, something they could touch, defend, and win. Inside the chamber, Jasmine locked eyes with Trump, her voice steady as steel. "Justice has spoken. And it has spoken against you." He recoiled, cornered not by her words, but by the weight of the gavel that had just struck. Yet, even as cheers echoed, a shadow lingered. Trump's empire was wounded, but not destroyed. His rage simmered beneath the cracks, his followers still restless, his ambition unbroken. And the question that now pulsed louder than the celebration was chilling in its simplicity. But is the fight truly over, or is the darkest chapter still to come? Across the nation, the streets erupted as if history itself had cracked open. From New York to Los Angeles, from the cornfields of Iowa to the steel mills of Pennsylvania, crowds surged into public squares chanting in unison, "Democracy is not for sale." The words rolled like thunder across a divided land, binding strangers into allies, transforming outrage into triumph. Screens lit up with images of Jasmine Crockett walking out of the Capitol, her figure framed against a sea of banners and flashing cameras. Protesters cheered, yet she raised her hand, urging calm. "This isn't about me, it's about us," she declared, her voice amplified by speakers, by television anchors, by millions of phones live streaming to the world. One woman cannot save a nation, but a people united cannot be broken. The crowd roared, their chants rising higher, echoing into the night like a promise carved into stone. In Washington, an elderly veteran, in faded uniform, stood rigid, his trembling hand lifting into a salute as Jasmine passed. Tears cut lines through the weathered skin of his face, tears not of sorrow, but of vindication. Nearby, children hosted handmade signs and shouted her name, their small voices piercing the chaos with unshakable clarity. From living rooms to stadiums, from churches to street corners, America celebrated not just Jasmine, but themselves. For once, the fight felt bigger than politics, it felt personal, it felt like survival. But as fireworks lit the night sky and chants shook the ground, a single question hung heavy, refusing to be drowned out by the noise. What will tomorrow's America look like, reborn in unity, or dragged back into the shadows by those who refuse to let go? The night air was heavy with the echoes of chants, the streets still alive with a restless energy that refused to fade. Inside the Capitol, cameras zoomed in as Jasmine Crockett stood before the nation, her voice steady yet charged with fire. Tonight is not victory for one woman or one party. This is a victory for unity, for justice, for accountability. It is proof that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the people. She paused, letting the silence amplify her words, her gaze sweeping the chamber and beyond, through the lens into millions of living rooms. But let me be clear, this is not the end. Every time someone tries to replace watchdogs with lapdogs, every time greed dares to strangle truth, we must rise. Because democracy doesn't defend itself, we defend it, together. Her words struck like a drumbeat, echoed by the roar of protesters outside, echoed by hashtags cascading across social media. Hashtag Rise for Democracy, hashtag Crockett the Warrior. For the first time in years, the nation felt not just fractured by fear, but bound by courage. Lisa Cook clasped Jasmine's hand. Sky Perryman nodded in quiet pride, and even those who had doubted her sat in stunned silence, realizing they had witnessed more than a hearing, they had witnessed a turning point. Jasmine leaned closer to the microphone, her voice dropping to a piercing whisper that carried farther than any shout. The question is no longer what one man wants to take. The question is, what kind of America you're willing to build? What kind of America do you want to live in? Comment below, because history is listening. This story reminds us that democracy is not an abstract idea, it is lived in our daily choices, in the courage to speak up when truth is under attack, and in the unity we build when fear tries to divide us. Jasmine's defiance shows that one voice can spark millions, but lasting change only comes when all of us choose to rise together. To fight for justice isn't confined to the halls of power, it belongs at every kitchen table, every street corner, every generation. What will you do today to protect truth and strengthen the America you want to live in? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.